We're all muted and I'm going to start. So you all have your photo. It's a little hard, I think, to see the photo here. So keep referring. That's why we send it out early, so you'll have a reference to it. The important thing to think about in doing an interior is really to think about everything in an extremely abstract way. You know, instead of thinking this is a table, this is the, you know, I think, well, they're just objects and shapes, and I'm just going to start putting them in as I see them and trying to place them in a way that then allows me to have some fun with them. And often at this stage, a lot of people will do, and by the way, I'm putting a little medium in my red oxide to let it flow. So if you see me dip into this, that's what that is. There are many artists do thumbnails. I think that's just a wonderful thing to do, but they don't work for me to do thumbnails and then to go on. I like to do all my designing kind of right here, and you know, it makes for a faster demo, but it doesn't always make for a better painting. So I certainly would encourage, you know, thinking of doing that, but I just like to get to it. You know, my feeling about a demo, and this is not a disclaimer yet, but you know, it may or may not end up being a good painting, but it really isn't about creating a masterpiece for myself. It's about giving you information that will help you to create your masterpieces. So I'm seeing little objects. One of the things I do like to see in an interior, thank you, is smaller and larger objects, things that, and again, just objects, things that I am putting in as just the shapes. I like the way the light came in the windows, and full disclosure, I cut them off a little so I would have a little bit less to deal with in terms of perspective, which I don't love. Now, instead of saying, here's a chair, and drawing the whole chair, instead I'm saying, here's an object at this end. Oh, by the way, somebody asked about the way I hold my brush, and they said something about it seems like sometimes I hold it like a pencil. This is holding it like a pencil, okay? I do not do that. I may hold it back here sometimes to have a different form of control, and then sometimes I do it overhand. But it's not the way that you would hold a pencil if you were writing, say. So I see that there's an object here. It's the top of the chair, but I'm not worrying too much about where, you know, about the whole chair, because what I see when I squint, and I squint a lot, is that all of this here on the side of the table is in shadow. And I'm not that concerned. I mean, you know that by now, those of you who've been taking a few of these know that I don't worry that much about the drawing, because I like to start putting in the shapes and then doing my carving, rather than worrying about it being a perfect drawing to begin with. Because that's what I love about oil paint. It's so forgiving. And rather than think, where's that chair necessarily end, I'm giving myself the line of the floor where things can then show up. And I do a lot of squinting. All of you should take the photo that hopefully you're looking at, that you were sent, and really squint down to see the big shapes, because, and this I love to know that all artists seem to say the same thing, you know, if you squint, you tend to get rid of the unnecessary, or not necessarily unnecessary, because eventually you might want to put in all kinds of detail, but you don't want the detail in right in at this stage of the game. Okay, I'm pretty much ready, I think, to get into some paint. So that's my first. I'm going to get a pretty big brush, and I'm going to wipe my palette from the brown, from the red oxide, because I don't want it to necessarily influence everything. Got my water here. And remember, everything I use is for water miscible. So therefore, I use water, not turpentine. And all my mediums are also for water miscible. So I'm looking first at the windows. I'm going to just kind of work my way down. I don't want this to be too white yet in the window, but I do want it to be pretty light. So I'm taking some white. I'm taking a little yellow ochre and maybe a little lilac, because, and some of that medium, because my hair that just fell in the medium here. I don't know about you guys, but my hair is like, yay. Okay, so I'm just going to keep this as one big shape right now. That's the window. And we know that the flowers are going to come in front of that. And we've got this window here. I love the fact that the light is coming through these windows. That was mostly what I, was kind of attracted to. And I'm not worrying about the window panes yet. I'm going to follow this light from this window right into the top of this cabinet here, but I'm going to change the color a little. So it's, and even lighter. I've got a kind of a little bit of a coolness going here. I'm going to add a little yellow to it, because I want this to then, nope, so here, to go into, I think it needs to be more blue. So I'm adding a little horizon blue to that. So you can see that I'm sort of putting in my, a bunch of lights to begin with. Coming back over here, I'm going to go into some darks for the wall. It's really, you want to look at the coordination of the lights and the darks. When you squint, it's much easier to see that's kind of what happens. That, you have your darks holding your lights, but you also have darks that might run into other darks. And full disclosure, I've never done this painting before, so who knows, but we're doing our best here. I always think you should take a little chance when you do a demo. Live dangerously. Okay, so this comes, we got this dark that comes down, but then there's also dark here. And I'm just trying to get all the color fields down. Again, those color fields don't have to be exactly staying that particular color that I'm putting down, but they should, at least reflect some of the value that we want to put in. And you really have to kind of go with this particular stage of the game. I mean, it's always kind of a mishmash at this point. Okay. I'm going to wash my brush. So I want to put all my color fields in before I get into something a little more defined. And the little shapes really don't need to be down yet. That's probably a little too light. So I'm putting some horizon blue. putting a little cadmium yellow light. So it is going to be kind of a greenish color. That's okay. I don't like that color. And keeping with that sort of darker area down here, it's a little too dark. I put in some sap green and a little of that verditer blue to kind of cool it down. And we actually have almost a third value right here. And again, just squinting down, I'm not really trying to make sense of exactly what I'm drawing and saying it's this, it's that. I'm just saying, oh, now I see a dark in here. And notice I'm not even thinking yet about the chairs because that's going to be done with a smaller brush and a little more detail. Putting in that vase, a little bit of a, and right now, again, just putting in the shapes. I'm not going to worry yet about the flowers. I'm just putting in a shape that holds that area right there. Okay, and now I'm going to go to a smaller brush. Step back up. Let's get a little more going here. And I think that's a nice kind of cool area of light back here. It's light, but it's not as light as the windows. Okay, and now just a little more floor color. And you can see that at this point, I step back and I see that I have most of it laid out in a color field, not specifics, not details, but just the big areas, okay? Now I'm gonna clean my palette because it's a small palette and it's messy very quickly. And it also helps me sort of clean my brain out too, because now I have to start thinking again and saying, okay, so I've chosen a smaller brush and I'm squinting down. And I want to get a little bit of this shape here. It's so weird because I can't be right in front of my canvas, so I keep making sure I don't put everything too lopsided. And I'm going to get that little bit of dark here. Now, if you squint down at that back chair and what's behind it, it's almost the same value and color, and you can kind of lose a little bit of an edge here on that. Right here, let it go into that light that's really what's behind it, and it can also hold the edge of that table. I'm actually letting, I'm coming up to the chair, but letting a little bit of the edge, I think, be what's actually the underpainting. And from this same puddle where I picked up that rather lighter area, it gets a little darker as it moves away from the sunlight of the windows. Carve right up to my edge to really pop that edge. Yep. Let's get it a little darker here. And I'm squinting, trying to get that much darker so it shows up. There we go. And you don't have to overdo it, you know, a little hint. Sometimes that's even better. Now you lose it a little into the darkness here, just a bit, which can actually be much more, evocative than putting the whole chair and trying to define every piece of it. I think it's actually better to lose it a little in here. It's more fun. And then pick it up again on the bottom here. Because in fact, if you're only looking at shapes, that's really what you see, because you're not really seeing you're just seeing values. And I'm simplifying it so that we don't have to do every single rung of that chair. But what I notice is that it's the light in the back here coming in because of the window also onto the floor. And you can use that to define the shapes of your chair. And this is, again, why I keep emphasizing that it's not so much, does somebody have a question? What? Okay, somebody just, you should all have, I don't know about this black and white business of what's showing up. You all were given the image in an email so that you should be able to see the image and look at it as I'm coming along. I hope that you can all do that because it's impossible to show you the whole image and the palette and the what we're doing here. I hope that's all okay with everyone. Well, that's a little too blue. Or green. Okay, I'm going to leave that. Wash my brush. Now I've left a lot of this for now because I think that the hero is really going to be our table here. So for the time being, that's what I really want to work on. When I say you work the whole, you do have to have everything down in some way, but then you can decide which areas to make more important than others. I think I want that to be a little lighter. Okay, and let's go back to our tabletop. I kind of like it being green, even though it's not really green. And I'm going to start recarving that tabletop. And in so doing, I'm going to also recarve the chairs that are against the table. Now it gets lighter on this end because of the way the light's coming in. So I've made this end of the table a little bit lighter. Right about now, you start wondering why did I choose to do something with all these chairs, but okay. Now I want to start on that vase, that nice blue vase. Sometimes I don't necessarily know what the object is, and that's okay. I just have to think of it anyway as a shape. It can be helpful sometimes not to know. I can move my. Sometimes if you don't know what the object is, it can be even better. Now, there's a little bit of light on that one side of the vase right here, which I'm doing with a more intense color rather than a light value. And I'm going to put these flowers in both positive, like now, and in other words, as an actual shape. But then also paint a little bit of sky holes in between. Okay. And now I want to paint around that a little bit for this, for the window. I put quite a bit of cadmium yellow in this. I think I need more white though. I've moved that window over a bit. I'm going to move it back a little. And again, use that background to carve the vase. Okay, stepping back, all righty. Very light down here, so I'm actually getting almost a pure white. And I'm going to lose, remember I've talked in the past about if you lose an edge to the light, there's more of a feeling of sunlight coming in. So rather than have the edge of that table show, let's just let it go right into that table right there. And lose that. Now there's fun little objects here. I'm just gonna put in things. This is the kind of thing that with more time, I might fill them and make them a little more obvious. But for the time being, they just serve to give you feelings that there's stuff on the table. Okay, and now I'm gonna redefine a little of this. Got to get some good dark in there. Keeping this super, super loose for a couple of reasons. One is there's no time to actually do them, you know, really in detail. But the other thing is if I do them in detail, they might be too important for something that's not that important. You know, after all, this is my story much more here than here. So these I just kind of want to, you know, give the hint of being a cabinet. Oops, gotta pay a little more attention to my perspective there. Okay, and we'll put a little bit of objects in there, just hints at them. Oops, I'm getting a little careless with my brush and not cleaning it enough. Okay, I'm going to leave that for now because it says as much as it needs to for the moment and move around to here. I want to get that wall a little bit more colorful. So I've added a little bit of green and I'm losing it to the dark at the bottom. And then I'll pull that chair a little bit out again. Just enough to show a hint of it. Doesn't need more than that right now. Okay. Let's go down to the, I'm going to clean my palette again. I still have half an hour. All right. And I'm going to come down onto the floor now and get a nice kind of warm floor coloring. And Again, I'm just throwing in these colors right now. This is still something that in time you could go back on and get the shapes, you know, kind of go back in on some of these shapes. But for the time being, the most important thing is that I just see that I've got this table and chairs happening in here. I'm really just looking at lights and darks. And losing a little of those bottoms to the darkness. Now I'm going to pull some of that dark back in, that where it does get lost too, like all in here. If I squint down, I barely see anything. It's just dark. There we go. Okay, now I'm going to step back. Righty, let's get a little of the rug in. It's not that important, but it's kind of nice to might get taken out eventually, but for time being, we're just going to stick it in there. I might take it out. You know what? I'm going to take it out, and I'll tell you why. I think I like the way the floor was just kind of losing itself there. Let's get this back up here. And let's bring that right into this dark here. Which is the side of this cabinet. Now I get some light up here. Get a little bowl of fruit there. Maybe it's tomatoes. And definitely in here, lose that bottom window. I will do some window panes before I'm done so you can sort of see how that happens. Window panes are really quite nice to work wet into wet because you don't want them to be too dark against what you're working on, against the light that comes in. Okay. Now, even though it's, I'm going to get a little more white out here. And I've been using today's ceramic white because that's starting to use it up. I probably should have stretched this all out, but I'm not going to worry about it now. So I'm just putting in objects. They're not important other than to just give a little interest to the painting. You can, which is why I'm only going to put them down, kind of leave them for now. And just kind of going to leave that whole area because I want to work on the windows and show you. This window is way too green. Let me give myself a place on the palette. And I'm going to mix color for the window panes that is I'm going to get my palette knife. And I'm going to use the palette knife, which I'm kind of mixing a little bit of this color, and then just almost at an angle of 45 degrees, so I get a little bit on my knife. Oops. That got too thick, so I'll have to work back on that. And I've come back with really almost a pure white here, back into this window, kind of just to give oops. It's a little too dark. Oh, that's a sad looking window. I'm going to scrape some of that off. Got too heavy and too messy. Yeah, I'll get better already. Okay, so I'm mixing a color for those panes, but I like it better with less paint on it. I think that was a helpful thing to do. And we'll just maybe hint at. No, that's too dark. I'll leave that. Look over here now. And I think I'm going to try it with a palette knife here too. Palette knife can be a very useful tool. I'm not that into complete palette knife paintings, but I think it can add some nice texture when you need it. And then I like to come back and shape it a little bit. It's not dark enough. think I'm obsessing on this stupid window. I'm gonna just, whoop. All right, let me take a look at this and see. Yeah, oh, that window really has to go. It's way too attention getting. Much better when they're barely there, I think. Yes, much better. It's kind of a good, I mean, you know, not every painting is going to be a masterpiece, but one of the good things sometimes I think to see, I mean, I'm struggling here and figuring out how to change things, make them, you know, hopefully work. And this is all part of painting. And solutions. I am not saying this in way of an excuse, but more the truth. It's just what happens sometimes. Let's see. Now I'm sort of looking at what are the last things that I really want to do here. Give a little bit of interest here, not too much. Okay, that's too blue. So I put that there because I want to have like a little hot spot of color, but that's not, it's a little too blue and a little too dark, I think. Let's try this instead. Yeah, that's better. Okay, I've got a few more minutes. I'm constantly keeping that nice dark under here. I think it helps to define the tablecloth, and I like the way it loses and then lets the chairs kind of emerge from it. Kind of get that little reflection that goes into the floor. Yeah, I'm going to just get this part darker to lead you in a little bit more. So these are all the little things you start to do when the big areas are kind of down. This is not good here because it's a little more white out. Okay, standing back. I want to make more of the flowers because I think that my favorite area is still going to be happening in here. Can't leave those things alone. Probably should. I'll leave it. All righty, let's see. I think I'm gonna, it's very wet and doing much more to it is probably not helping. So, I'm so upset about these windows. I'm really not happy with them. So what I'm doing, since I'm not happy with them, is a very technical thing called messing them up so they take up less attention. So that the parts I do want to work better. Yeah, it's definitely less attention getting, I think. And one thing I've also sometimes forget, and I'm realizing now too, is a lot of straight lines in the back take up a lot of attention. So if I soften some of these edges back here, the way I'm doing, I think it'll bring us back to our story, which is really what's happening in the foreground. Yeah, definitely better. Okay. Yeah. Soften that too. Okay, I am going to stop. Turn this on. Hold on. Get this over here. I'm just going to wipe my hands before I touch my computer. Bring you over. By the way, I should probably move this a little bit closer so you can see it. Okay, and I'm going to unmute you guys. Don't all scream at once. Okay. Are you all there?
Yes.
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 Wow.
So I'm going to bring this over. We can talk a little. Hold on. And I know that you wanted to say, yes, I have that. So let me move you guys over here where I can see you. Me. You know how to raise your hand if you have a question, but I have you all on right now, so. Okay. First of all, I think B wanted to know, B, this is the two different ones I use. The one on the right, I'm starting to like a little bit better, but this one's old, so it may be the reason I like this one better. This is the Daniel Smith water-soluble paint medium. And this is the Artisan, the Winsor Newton Artisan medium.
All right, well, I guess put her in front of the TV and light it.
Okay, is everybody there? Can you all?
Yeah. Put it back in front of the TV screen again and we'll take
Okay, so this one is called the Artisan Winsor Newton, just painting medium.
painting medium, right?
But I think I'm starting to recommend this one instead.
Oh, okay.
Daniel Smith.
Where am I? This is the Daniel Smith water-soluble painting medium.
Okay.
And this is the Cobra Red Oxide Transparent. It's a different brand. It's Cobra brand rather than Winsor Newton.
Does Blick handle that too?
Oh yeah, I think so. I think
Yeah.
Jerry's Blick. And, you know, get on their list. It's always
Cobra.
a sale going on. Are there any questions?
I have a question.
Yeah.
Who do you want to start?
Who's it? Who's
It's Donna. I have one little question.
Sure.
I kept on looking at the dark area between the window on the
Very
left
good.
and the
Take
cabinet.
care. Okay.
And I kept on thinking it needed to have that dark go down to the table so that the cabinet didn't look like it was in front of the window. And it just bothered me.
You know, you're
Is
right.
that a choice?
I'm going to do that right now. Here. Because I think I said that, thank you. I love when my students start seeing that because that means you're really learning.
Oh, because I kept on wondering, is there a reason that she did?
Yes, I didn't do it right. That's the reason.
That's the reason.
This should, I'm going to do it like this.
You make it. Oh.
Yes.
Oh,
Yes.
Oh, yes, so much better.
Oh,
Yeah.
that bothered me so much. Okay.
There we go.
Okay.
Yeah. Okay. Good call.
Thank you.
catch. Good catch.
That is better.
Very good call. Yes, much better. Well, let me talk a little about, because, when you have I got to move this out of the way here. Oh, Deborah, you have a question.
Oh, just real quick.
Sure.
Mixing your browns for today. How did you do that?
Okay, so I mostly used yellow ochre, cadmium yellow, and cadmium yellow deep, or cadmium orange, which is what I call it. And I kind of mixed them together. And then if it was lighter, I might put a little jaune brillant in. And for the darker, I put some more red oxide transparent, because I did want them to stay really warm on that floor. Yeah. So a couple of things. I mean, obviously it's a lot to do in an hour, and I think my philosophy always with a demo is, you give as much information as you can in an hour, and after that you're more or less painting for yourself. This is how I see it. And maybe I would go back in on this at some point, maybe I wouldn't, but I wanted to get the key elements of how you think when you do an interior, and of how you kind of approach the shapes and stuff. Because so if just to review how this went, I laid it out incorrectly, obviously, because I had the window a little too close to the cabinet, but that's okay. And I put in the key elements that I wanted, the big shape, and the littler shapes are the kinds of things that would be fun to do maybe now once it's dried a little and you can come back in and you can do that. But they're not integral to what it is to do an interior. And so getting the shapes down and always thinking as hard as you can, try to think it's not a table, it's not a chair, it's a shape. And here's the difference. When I put the chair down, if I was thinking too much chair, then I would probably have drawn out the chairs, not paid any attention to the fact that some of them disappear in value and some of the light emerges. And that is really what is defining those chairs. Let me get the piece open.
Yeah.
This is expired.
Yeah. Wow.
Expires June.
So in other words, can you see this? In other words, like these things disappear into shadow, they re-emerge, but it's the lights on them, especially back here, the light on those chairs, that's what defines the chair. It's not drawing an entire chair, especially on the bottom too. It's putting marks down and then carving back out with lights. That's what starts to define, the chair. And that's it's the thinking of how you approach an interior. So it's a very good example of thinking in an abstract way, but you're still creating an actual image. Does that make sense?
Yes.
Yeah. Yes.
Yes. Oops, let me get my glasses on here. Pat, is that you?
Yeah.
You have your hand raised? Yes.
Yes, I do. I was just curious, are you thinking warmer colors near the center of interest? Or do you think
Not
warmer towards
necessarily
the foreground?
warmer, although this is a fairly warm painting. I think more, the center of interest actually is usually where the darkest lights and the darkest darks and the lightest lights kind of come together, or the most intense colors are put. It doesn't really matter if they're warm or cool. It matters more how saturated they are, how much, intensity or chroma. Clearly the table, I think there's no question this is where the center of interest was going. And everything else was kind of muted and pushed back. And that's why those windows were such a problem, because every time I tried to do the windows, they became too important and too messy and too, they started to overwhelm what is really the center of interest, which is of course the table, the flowers, that all was that's what made me want to do the painting. Certainly not the cabinet or, it was more the way the light came in. And I think once this dries, I can get that light to be popped even more if I choose to. But does that make sense, what I'm saying?
Yeah. Yes, it does. Thanks.
Yeah. Anybody else's hands up here? I'm not seeing, anybody else have any questions?
I do. Deborah does.
Okay.
So I noticed when you were doing the windows, there's things about the windows I noticed. Your lines, and I think were going, they should have been, I believe, sort of parallel with table and going back into perspective.
Yeah, they're not,
They were sort of going in the opposite direction. Maybe that's what you
No,
were saying.
I think that's only part of it.
Did you mean to take out, there's a section between the windows, a
Yeah.
wall?
Mm-hmm.
There's
I
more.
made much narrower.
Yeah, you did. Okay, all right.
It
But I
wasn't
think-
necessarily intentional to make it narrower. It's just that in the amount of time we have, I don't want to spend it all. You know, I know I need a darker light, a darker light. I don't want to spend that much time, you know, making sure everything is perfectly measured because.
Yeah,
that's
but I
not-
like the way you did it. I mean, I like what you've done because too much wall could have been too,
Yes,
Yeah.
agreed.
would have taken away from something, you know, it
Very
was too.
True.
Yeah, I think part of the problem though is that the windows are probably, yeah, I mean, if once it dries, I could go back in and kind of put them more into the perspective that they're in, but also they step back more and they started coming forward just too much.
Yeah.
And so at least scraping them down gave me an opportunity to push them back again.
Well, I like what you ended up because
Yeah.
I'm seeing light, but I'm not being overwhelmed by detail.
Yeah, no, well, I always knew I didn't want to do that, but even so, it kept,
I know.
yeah, it kept
May I-
bugging me. It
May
was-
I say something?
Absolutely.
This is Joyce. This painting, for me, came alive when you put the light on the floor.
Mhm.
You know, when the top was fine, but when the light started coming on the floor, all of a sudden, bingo, it was there, which I said, oh my gosh, I have to remember this. I have one other comment, and it's about white paints.
Mm.
A lot of people don't use titanium also because it's a stiffer paint.
Yeah.
I use a blend, a combination of zinc and titanium because it's softer and it changes it.
Yeah.
But I just throw that out there.
Yeah, no, thank you. And yeah, I've noticed when I watch the Streamline, as I said, a lot of them do tend to use titanium. But I have to say, like, I don't mind not using gloves because I don't use toxic paints. But I watch these people painting without gloves and using these titaniums and these cadmiums, and it just freaks me out.
Well, it's a stiff paint. I don't care.
Yeah,
I find it hard to use as a. But
What's
anyway,
that?
thank you. This was wonderful. I really enjoyed today.
Oh, thank you. Thank you. It was.
Very good.
Okay. Are there any, I mean, I will be taking a photo of this that you'll get. I did remember to video today, so that.
Aline, I've got one
Sure.
quick question.
Mhm.
Why did you choose the rosy color for the window edges?
Well, it's not really the window. Oh, you mean rather than
the
that?
trim, the window trim?
Yeah, I kind of didn't care that much about what color it was. It's actually not that rosy. It was more of a, it was a little more of a.
More of a lavender?
Yeah, it was a little more of a lavender. I wanted something light and sort of coolish. But what I kept discovering is that by putting those panes in, again, remember, I always say, and I have to remember it myself, like where your eye goes is, you know, is to the center of interest. And then when you refocus, you start getting obsessed about, you know, that it's like the mountains in the distance. And I think what happened for me with those windows is I kept wanting to develop them, and the paint was so wet and everything. But more than anything, it started to say, I want you to look at me and not the table. And I kept having to say, no, it's still about the table. And so when those got scraped back, I think the table came back to the foreground.
Thank you.
That's how it felt for me. Yeah, I will photo this. I don't know if I have the best light to do it right now or not, but and you'll get that as well as you'll get a link to the video. I think towards the end of the week is usually when the video is
Thank you.
ready.
Thank you.
Any other questions?
Thank you very much.
Thank you.